What does the North American F-86 Sabre, the Lockheed F-94 Starfire, the F-104 Starfighter, and the Convair F-106 Delta Dart all have in common? Let's find out on Celebrating Aviation with Mike Machat. Now, before we give you the answer, I want to just mention that the photos that I'm going to be showing you in the next 20 minutes or so are from the vast photo archives of Wings and Air Power magazine. I had the experience of being editor-in-chief of these two publications in the early 2000s. We had tens of thousands of photographs. I have chosen what I feel are some of the coolest images of official Air Force photos for you. And that answers the question of what do these four airplanes have in common? These four airplanes were called the Interceptors. The first jet interceptor was the Messerschmitt Me-262, which first flew in 1942 and intercepted airplanes like this. This interceptor, the Convair F-102, was built to intercept airplanes like this. We're going to talk about the United States Air Force Air Defense Command. The headquarters of the Air Defense Command were established in March of 1946 at New York's Mitchell Field, seen there in the photo. And at top is the 2nd Fighter Squadron, 52nd Fighter Group, Mitchell Field. And no, that's not a typo. Mitchell Field on Long Island was named for former New York Mayor John P. Mitchell, who lost his life in 1918 while training to become a pilot for the Army Air Service. But technically the first airplane assigned to ADC was the Northrop P-61 Black Widow. And this just carried over from its World War II mission, but it was soon replaced by the North American F-82 Twin Mustang and aircraft such as the F-51 Mustang and Republic F-47 Thunderbolt seen here. And again, those are the post-World War II designations for those airplanes. With the jet age, the Lockheed F-80 Shooting Star, North American F-86, Republic F-84 Thunderjet all came into the ADC role. But the first dedicated interceptor for the Air Defense Command would be the North American F-86D. And this was a radar-equipped, upgraded version with afterburner for its J-47 engine. And this really began the story of the Air Defense Command. You can see here the markings. This is interesting, too, a little bit of Machat's law of the inconsistency of airplane markings. You've got the 24-inch buzz number on the nose, the small U.S. Air Force title and jet number on the tail, and an 18-inch high stencil-lettered U.S. Air Force title. And this was soon replaced by the 24-inch U.S. Air Force title, buzz number, and just the lone jet number on the tail. This photo, by the way, was taken at the North American plant in Inglewood, California. It's on the south side of Los Angeles International Airport, which is visible in the distance. Now, this view of the F-86D's cockpit gives you a good insight into the heavy workload of a single pilot who had to fly the jet, deal with plotting the intercept geometry, firing the rockets, and monitoring critical fuel flow throughout the mission. It was a heavy workload. This distinctive shark mouth painted F-86D is from the 520th Fighter Interceptor Wing at Geiger Field, Washington, and was photographed in 1955. The three diagonal stripes show that it's the squadron commander's airplane. Good-looking jet. Armament for the F-86D was the Mighty Mouse unguided rocket that was fired from a tray that extended from the lower fuselage, as you see in the top photo. And then later on, the F-86 was equipped with the heat-seeking Sidewinder missile that you see there in the bottom photo. Next up is the F-89 Scorpion from Northrop. The twin-engine two-seat Scorpion was named for the predatory arachnid with a high tail. The prototype Scorpion first flew in 1948, but it experienced developmental problems that were eventually solved with later operational models like the F-89D. This was the Air Force's first dedicated interceptor with true crew members. You look at the pilot's cockpit, you can see already, compared to the F-86, a bit simpler. And then in the rear seat was the Radar Intercept Officer, or RIO, and he was responsible for intercept geometry and the weaponry. Nice rear view of the F-89 showing the trademark Northrop split aileron. This operated as a speed brake. And notice the large ample flap area as well. Nice ramp shot of a Scorpion with Falcon missiles that retracted into the wingtip pods. F-89s were the first aircraft to carry the Hughes Falcon, the AIM-4, and in January 1955 scored the first air-to-air Falcon kill with a missile equipped with an active warhead. They shot down a Boeing QB-17 drone. Here we see an F-89J carrying nuclear warhead-equipped Douglas MB-1 Genie air-to-air missiles on its outboard pylons. And these Scorpions are wearing the iconic red Arctic markings used on aircraft assigned to air bases in Alaska during this era. Next, we have the Lockheed F-94C Starfighter, first flew in April of 1950. This was an evolution of Lockheed's famed T-33 trainer, and the F-94 Starfighter was the ultimate F-94 model and entered service in March 1953 at Otis Air Force Base, Massachusetts. My photo of the week is this stunning shot of the Lockheed plant at Van Nuys, California, where the T-33, F-94, and even the U-2 were built. Today, this ramp and that hangar in the background are still there and occupied by the latest business jets. The F-94 was a subsonic aircraft, despite being the first Air Force jet equipped with an afterburner, seen here in a night engine run. Beautiful ramp shot, and what can you say about bare metal airplanes in the 1950s? Just gorgeous. Armament for the Starfighter was anti-aircraft rockets fired from the pods seen mid-span on the leading edges of the wing. Notice also that the airplane has a straight wing but a swept tail on the horizontal stabilizers. This highly modified NF-94 actually has the nose cone of the Boeing Beaumark missile, and they were used for in-flight testing of the guidance system. Here's a nice shot of the Beaumark, and you see that this is powered by two ramjet engines below the fuselage and a single liquid fuel and later solid fuel booster in the tail of the fuselage. Now, when you look at history, the first rocket-propelled interceptor was the Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet, which first flew, if you can believe it, in 1941. There were also hybrid jet and rocket interceptors like the Saunders Roe SR-53 from Great Britain and Republic's XF-91 Thunderceptor, the first aircraft to achieve supersonic speed in level flight powered by a jet engine. Ever heard of the F-98? Yeah, me neither, but that was the designation for the AIM-4 Falcon missile, a radar-guided air-to-air missile. And the F-99, again, was the Boeing Beaumark. Now, although out of chronological sequence here, the McDonnell F-101B came into operational service in 1959, 1 year after the F-104, and flew in active ADC missions up until 1971. This airplane was a two-seat variant of the original F-101A Voodoo and carried both Hughes Falcon and Douglas Genie missiles. The F-101 was the only twin-engine Century Series aircraft. Here's a nice close-up on the ramp with the Genie installation. And the airplane had a rotating tray that could carry Genies on one side and Falcons on the other. Beautiful in-flight shot, clean lines of the F-101. Really good-looking airplane. It was referred to by its pilots as the 10 Wonder. And the CF-101B flew for the Royal Canadian Air Force from 1961 all the way to 1988. Convair's Delta Wing F-102 brought the Air Defense Command into the supersonic age. This airplane was assigned to the 327th Fighter Interceptor Wing at George Air Force Base, California in 1956. And note the early markings with the small U.S. Air Force title on the tail fin and a large buzz number mid-fuselage. Early F-102As also had the shorter vertical tail fin. Wait a minute, I have a better picture of the short fin on a 102. Yeah, there we go. There's the later tail. You can see it's a taller vertical with more surface area for better lateral control. And you see there the novel split speed brake, and the drag chute is also housed in the center of that as the brake is open on landing. Really beautiful lines. Of course, Steve Canyon's favorite jet, and it was referred to as the Deuce. This was also the first Air Force jet to carry weapons in an internal weapons bay, which added aerodynamic cleanliness to the design. Here's the two-seat version, the only side-by-side aircraft in the original Century series. I don't count the F-111 in that group, but this was affectionately referred to by its crews as the Tub. Now, here's an airplane that never got off the drawing board, but it was an interceptor, and that's Republic's XF-103. Envisioned in 1953, it only made it to mock-up stage, but it was interesting because it was a hybrid turbojet ramjet powered airplane that was intended to be an all-titanium structure and would achieve a speed of Mach 3 at 80,000 feet. Now, that was a pretty tall order in 1953, but 10 years later, there was an airplane that did exactly that, and that, of course, was Lockheed's beautiful YF-12. Here's Lockheed's XF-104 Starfighter. It first flew in March of 1954. And think about this, a Mach 2 jet that flew just about a year after the world's first flight to Mach 2 in a rocket-powered Douglas D558-2. Now, this is the XF-104 with early air intakes, a shorter fuselage. It was a Mach 1 plus airplane. But here's the YF-104, which is more indicative of the final form of the airplane being rolled out at the assembly plant at Palmdale, California. So the YF-104 came to be in February of 1956. And I remember seeing this exact photo in Life magazine a few months later and wondering, how does the air get into the engine? What you're seeing there is a fairing that's placed over the highly classified design of the 104's intake. Let's take a look at the cockpit for a moment. Compare this again to the F-86, quite a bit simpler, much cleaner layout. And let me call your attention to the fuel quantity gauge at the upper right. It's right there. I had the occasion to fly in an F-104 on an Air Force art assignment, and it's the only only military jet I ever flew in, where when we went into afterburner on takeoff, I actually watched the fuel gauge needle move. Now, there's the actual air intake with the spike, which controlled the shock wave into the engine and gave the airplane a Mach 2.2 top speed, seen here equipped with Sidewinder missiles. This was referred to as a missile with a man in it. The leading and trailing edges of the wings were sharp for aerodynamic purposes and had to be covered with felt covers on the ground to avoid injuring unsuspecting ground crewmen working around the airplane. Here's a two-seat version, originally referred to as the TF-104 and later redesignated F-104D. The world's first operational Mach 2 jet aircraft, the Starfighter looked like it was flying supersonic, just sitting on the ramp. It entered ADC service in 1958. Coupled with its blazing speed, new features like inertial navigation systems and analog fire control systems gave the Starfighter capabilities that were only dreamed of when ADC was first established. Here's a night engine run of the GE J-79, and let's compare that to the F-94. J-79 is just about twice the amount of thrust. And now we get to the Cadillac of jets, as it was called by its pilot. The Convair F-106 first flew in December of 1956. And just as a footnote, this was a month after Convair also made the first flight of the B-58 Hustler. Convair was on a roll in 1956. As a good view of the Coke bottle fuselage, the area rule, which gave the airplane a Mach 2 plus speed. Beautiful view of the jet. And when you talk about clean lines, here it is. I should mention this airplane was to this day, the world's fastest single-engine jet aircraft. It achieved a speed of Mach 2.41 in the process of setting a world speed record in December of 1959. That record's never been broken by a single-engine jet. This in-flight photo proves the old saying that if it looks right, it flies right. Really elegant airplane. The F-106 was considered the absolute favorite of any pilot who ever flew the sleek Delta Wing jet. Now, let me show you the F-102, and I'm going to give you a comparison with the F-106. You can see the longer fuselage. The air intakes are well aft of the cockpit, basically the same nose. And let's look at the tail fin and see how Convair engineers arrived at that shape. Believe it or not, it's the F-102 tail with added surface area on the trailing edge. And of course, the engine exhaust is different. The 102 was powered by the Pratt & Whitney J57. The 106 was the Pratt & Whitney J75. Here's the two-seat version, quite a long single-piece canopy with 3 hydraulic struts. And again, a good-looking airplane. We've had discussions before on the channel about certain two-seat airplanes that look as good, if not better, than the single seat, and I'd have to put the 106 in that category. I'd like to talk about a couple of ADC support aircraft. I got to fly in this airplane. It was the first military jet I ever flew in, the Lockheed T-33, and they were even painted in ADC gray, but they operated as support aircraft and pilot proficiency aircraft for the ADC squadrons. Another airplane, very significant, Lockheed RC-121D Warning Star Constellation. This particular airplane was assigned to the 551st Airborne Early Warning and Control Wing at Otis Air Force Base, Maryland, seen here at MacArthur Airport on Long Island. The Air Defense Command was deactivated March 31st, 1980. However, the last aircraft type to fly the actual ADC mission was the McDonnell Douglas F-15C. I took this photo in 1987, assigned to the 5th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. And if you look at the tail of the airplane, you'll notice a Tactical Air Command badge. TAC had taken over the ADC mission in 1980. But as I mentioned, the unit was still called the 5th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. The most produced of the interceptors were the F-86 and the 104. But the smallest production run, oddly enough, was the 106, with only 250 airplanes built. And I should mention these were never exported, never used by NATO, and never flown by other countries. So what might have been? Well, I have 2 interesting airplanes to show you. Did you ever see a Grumman F-14 in Air Force interceptor mode? It's got the Phoenix missile under the fuselage and an ADC badge on the tail. This photo was taken at Calverton, New York, and wishful thinking, it never was adapted. But much like the F-4 was a Navy airplane used by the Air Force, the Grumman folks hoped that would be the case here. And of course, no talk about interceptors would be complete without the Lockheed YF-12. Would have been the highest performance interceptor ever built and flown. That role was taken over by other airplanes. And of course, this advanced to the SR-71 Blackbird. But as we always talk about history on the channel, let's take a moment to look at this. The F-94C Starfighter, 600-mile-an-hour airplane in 1950. The YF-12, 2,200 miles per hour, only 13 years later. That's called progress. So there you have it, a look at Air Force interceptors flown by the Air Defense Command. Special thanks to the wonderful folks who made this episode possible. And a quick reminder that the channel's first paid program will be coming soon. And by a landslide vote, it was hands down Aviation History by Decade. We're going to start with the Fabulous 50s. So sign up to be notified of the schedule. And there's a link in the title block, no obligation, but we'd love to see the names and have you partake of this new program. So thank you for celebrating aviation with Mike Machat. Appreciate your watching the channel. If you haven't subscribed, we'd love having you on board. And please do hit the like button on the way out. That does help us with YouTube. As always, until next time, take care.